busy night of news, diving into all things people, power, and politics. This is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. The Detroit mayoral race took up our entire show yesterday, and in case you missed it because of baseball, we'll have a quick recap of what happened in about 20 minutes. But we have a lot to catch you up on outside of that, so buckle up. More strikes launched on vessels suspected of carrying drugs in the Pacific. And this undeclared war on drugs has congressional leaders on both sides concerned. We're taking a closer look. And a new poll is out in the race for governor. It is neck and neck between three candidates, and one of them is on the show tonight. Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan on the Pulse as he was talking about his race as an independent. His thoughts on why Dems need to slow their roll with their criticism of Governor Whitmer after she worked with President Trump to bring a mission to Selfridge. But we begin with the government shutdown now in its fifth week. Both sides having their heels firmly dug in. Democrats want Affordable Care Act subsidies extended in any deal to reopen the government, while Republicans say there won't be talks before the government reopens. This is day 28. You might remember the last one lasted 35 days. All of this as government workers are going without a paycheck. Today, the Air Traffic Controllers Union passed out flyers to passengers, letting them know this is the first zero paycheck day for these essential workers.
So for us, the biggest thing is the stress. You know, as most people are aware, like we've got one of the highest stress jobs in the country, and all this does is add to that stress. You know, instead of me thinking about how I'm going to keep your airplane apart from another airplane, I've now got to think about how am I going to pay my mortgage? How am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to put food on the table? And as the stress levels increase and you find controllers who are too stressed out to actually be able to do the job effectively and safely, you know, that's where you'll see the impacts across the national airspace system.
Now, with the turmoil, a sigh of relief for workers to tell you about. A judge extends an order blocking the Trump administration from firing federal workers during the government shutdown. She says unions are likely to win on claims the cuts are arbitrary and politically motivated. That order is in place while a lawsuit plays out. But now fears for families across the country, with the U.S. Department of Agriculture announcing federal food aid, which you probably know as SNAP benefits, won't go out November 1st. The Trump administration says it won't tap into the roughly $5 billion it has in reserve to keep the program going. The program helps about 1 in 8 Americans buy groceries. The USDA claims these contingency funds are not available legally to cover regular benefits, saying they're supposed to cover things like helping people in disaster areas instead. Attorney General Dana Nessel, though, and 20 other state attorneys general suing claim the USDA illegally suspended the program. Nessel said this in a statement announcing the lawsuit. If the reality of 42 million Americans going hungry, including 1.4 million Michiganders, isn't an emergency, I don't know what is. It is cruel, inhumane, and illegal to hold back emergency reserves while families struggle to put food on the table. Michigan's Attorney General. Turning now to the Trump administration's war on suspected drug traffickers. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says strikes killed 14 people on 4 different boats suspected of carrying drugs. This latest attack happened in the Eastern Pacific. Now, one person survived this latest round of strikes and was rescued by Mexican authorities. It comes as lawmakers on both sides of the aisle share their concerns about the strike. Congress has the power to declare war, and the Trump administration has said it's an armed conflict with the drug cartels.
At this point, I would call them extrajudicial killings, and this is akin to what China does, to Iran does with drug dealers. They summarily execute people without presenting evidence to the public.
They have a very hard time explaining to us. They tie themselves in knots trying to explain the legality of these strikes.
Senator Lindsey Graham says the president will brief lawmakers on the strikes when he gets back from Asia. But we should point out the Trump administration hasn't provided evidence to support its claims about the boats, their alleged connections to drug cartels, or even who was killed in the strikes that started in early September. From the war on drugs to the war between Israel and Hamas, explosions were seen over Gaza last night after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he ordered powerful strikes in the Palestinian territory. Witnesses also heard what sounded like tank shelling in central Gaza. Health officials say at least 7 Palestinians were killed. This comes after an Israeli official said Hamas fired on Israeli forces in southern Gaza. In response, Hamas delayed handing over the remains of another hostage. Israel has been frustrated with delays in returning those bodies, as Hamas says it's ramping up efforts. But the U.S. says Hamas is making the effort to find them.
Obviously, the ceasefire is based on obligations on both sides, just off 13 hostages, 2 Americans included. But we don't view that as a violation of the ceasefire.
The next phase of the ceasefire poses a bigger challenge here. That'll include Hamas disarming and international security forces moving into Gaza as a decision is made about who will govern that territory. The delay in returning remains is only adding to that problem. Hamas says it's struggling to find bodies because of the destruction in Gaza, but Israel is accusing the group of delaying the returns on purpose. That's just scratching the surface, so let's pick up the pace and run through some of the other big stories that we're covering right now. A federal judge issues a warning to the Trump administration, saying they need to stop making inflammatory statements about this man. The judge is concerned that Kilmar Abrego Garcia's human smuggling trial could be prejudiced. The order calls the statements troubling, with many of them being, quote, exaggerated, if not simply inaccurate, and says there could be sanctions if they continue to make these statements. Abrego Garcia's case has been in the headlines because of his wrongful deportation to El Salvador. The Trump administration admitted it was a mistake, but claims he's a gang member, something Abrego Garcia and his attorneys deny. Staying in court, where a federal judge orders the Trump administration to release grants addressing the shortage of mental health workers in schools. The program was funded after the 2022 Uvalde school shooting. The goal is to help schools hire more counselors, psychologists, and social workers, focusing on rural and underserved areas. And the Trump administration is against the diversity considerations used to award those grants and told recipients they wouldn't get money until after December. The judge called the decision arbitrary and said the states made a case that the cuts could cause real harm. And former Vice President Harris isn't ruling out another run at the top job. She did an interview with the BBC that was posted over the weekend and said she expects a woman will be president in the near future, adding it could possibly be her. She said, quote, "I'm not done." Harris said she hasn't decided if she'll run in 2028. You'll remember she took over the top of the ticket after President Biden dropped out last year, ultimately losing to President Trump. Let's turn back to the U.S. Capitol for just a second, but not about the shutdown. Lawmakers are talking about AI chatbots, and they're taking them on, announcing new bills banning them from minors. The reason is simple, but quite frankly, horrific. There are actual cases where parents say the bots engaged with children in sexualized conversations, and in some cases actually coach them to take their own lives. The bills require age verification processes and mandates these bots say they're human, say they're not human and don't have professional credentials. They have to say that. It also creates criminal penalties for tech companies developing bots that engage in explicit conduct from minors or encourage suicide.
Our children are not experiments. They're not data points or profit centers. They're real human beings.
Big tech is using our children as guinea pigs in a high-tech, high-stakes experiment.
This is a new frontier that will be a nightmare for the American family and American children unless Congress does its job.
Several states have passed their own measures, and while multiple bills are circulating through Congress, there have been no comprehensive laws passed at the national level. These bills will likely face pushback from privacy advocates who say age verification laws are invasive and prevent free online speech. All right, we are not even through the Detroit mayoral race yet, but it is time to dive into the race for governor. There's a new poll out. We will go by the numbers and talk with Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, the independent candidate for governor, about that poll and his run next. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. Turning now to the race for governor. Yes, we know we are a year away from the midterms, but a new poll is giving us a look at how close the race is between the three people believed to be front runners. Democratic Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, Republican Congressman John James, and Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, the lone independent in the race. So as we like to do on The Pulse, it's time to go by the numbers. In the horse race, Benson has a slight lead over both candidates. But here's the thing. It's all within that 4% margin of error, as you can see over here. Benson has 30%, James 29%, and Duggan 26%. 15% say they're not sure yet. But as we dive even deeper into the support each one of these candidates has, Benson has 62% of Democratic support and 22% of independents, as you see here. Republican support, not surprisingly, is pretty low at 5%. And as we take a look at James, it's almost the exact opposite. 61% of Republicans say they support him, 21% of independents, and just 3% of Democrats. Not surprising either. But as we turn to Duggan, here's where things get really interesting. It's split pretty evenly. 19% of Republicans support him, 25% of Democrats, and look at this, 35% of independents as well. It's pretty interesting. I caught up with the mayor earlier today about a number of topics, including his independent run, Detroit's progress, and the divide in Lansing. Take a look.
It's the main reason I'm running for governor. I mean, when 60% of our third graders across the state of Michigan can't read at grade level, and Lansing just kind of shrugs and lives with it, I said somebody has to say this is too much. And one of the things I'm going to talk about today is, since the voters passed Proposal A in 1994 and we raised that sales tax to 6%, the money was supposed to go into the school aid fund. And the state legislature is now taking $1.3 billion out of our schools, spending it on other things, as our performance in classrooms declining. And somebody has to say enough's enough.
When you hear people, there are critics out there as you're running your campaign, and when we talk about education, the Democratic Party right away said, well, Mayor Duggan is taking money from people who are supporting big charter schools. How can he say he's for education the way he is? What do you tell them?
So I am getting support from people in the public school side. I've gotten support from people like Mark Bernstein at the University of Michigan, and Rebecca Behar-Cook at Michigan State University, Democratic leaders. And you've seen the analysis. 50% of my money has come from Democrats, and 50% has come from Republicans. 50% of my support's coming from Democrats and 50% from Republicans. But the Democrats, first they complain I'm splitting their vote, and then they say all my support's coming from the Republicans. They can't make up their mind what they're mad about.
Does it bother you that even as you run as an independent, you see this kind of a fight?
Does it bother me? I'd be disappointed in these guys if they did anything else. The Democratic Party today, they don't talk about affordable housing. They don't talk about dealing with long-term mental health issues. Democrats are united around two things. They hate Republicans in general, and they hate Donald Trump specifically. And all of their financial appeals, all of their messaging is about what they're against. And that's just not me. I actually want to talk about what we should be for.
But certainly you must have strong feelings about the Republican Party and President Trump. How do you frame that topic?
You know, I disagree with both parties on a number of issues, but if you look at what I've done as mayor, I get Republicans and Democrats to work together on a lot of things. We have Republican business people and Democratic unions coming together to build the rebuilding of the train station. Republican like Bill Ford and Democratic building trades unions coming together. Same thing at Ford Field. Same thing on the riverfront. In Detroit, we've rebuilt because we've included everybody, and everybody's been valued.
Have you had conversations with President Trump about how things are going in the city of Detroit?
I've never talked to President Trump.
Never. What are your impressions of him right now, the way he's talking about the National Guard going into certain cities?
So, you know, I lived through one Trump presidency for 4 years, and I never had an issue. I didn't engage. I didn't pick fights. We just ran the city well. And right now, what's happening is remarkable on the crime rate. You can't dispute the facts. The first year I was running, we had 750 carjackings in Detroit. 15 times a week, somebody stuck a gun in somebody's face, stole their car. With what we've done now this year, we're going to be at 75. We're down 90%. We're down to the lowest shootings we've seen since the early 1960s. And the president knows that, the U.S. attorney knows that, the ATF knows that, the DEA knows that, and we're actually working with the federal agencies here on law enforcement. So,
you think that President Trump recognizes that, and that's why he leaves Detroit alone?
Again, I think that certainly the local federal officials who are working with us every day, breaking up these gangs and these drug rings, know what's going on. But I've never talked to the president. I don't know what's in his mind. All I know is he's never mentioned Detroit, and if he did factually, you can't say Detroit's crime rates go in the wrong direction. Anybody who's been downtown on a weekend knows this is a safe city.
In general, as someone who has led the city through some more violent times than we're having now, what would be ready to answer the question, does National Guard ever play a role in supplementing with police departments across this country?
Again, I have been here 12 years. And we've dropped the violent crime dramatically without any use for the National Guard. So, you know, our last shooting was 45-year-old shot his 38-year-old brother in a dispute. The National Guard isn't going to be able to deal with that issue. What we need to do is keep people from beefing with each other, which we're doing. And so there's been no conversation about the National Guard in Detroit, nor given what's happening on the crime rate, would there be any reason to.
Let's talk about how to fix the problems in Lansing. If you become governor, how do you even begin that process?
I'll begin it the same way I did here. You remember what politics was like in Detroit. The mayor and city council fought tenaciously. People used to go home at night and turn on the reruns of council meetings for entertainment. That stopped. And it stopped because I formed a really good partnership with council. I spent hours with each one of those members and got to understand their priorities, got them to understand mine. And in 12 years, I haven't had to veto an action of city council. I do believe that if the people of this state elect me as an independent, they will deliver a hell of a message to the Republicans and the Democrats to say, stop this nonsense of the constant fighting. The two parties don't own our votes, and if you keep behaving like this, we'll find a third choice. And I think that'd be good for Michigan and good for the country.
It seems like it's been pretty good relative to seeing Matt Hall and Governor Whitmer work together. They have recently, and it's worked pretty well.
You know, I cheered Gretchen Whitmer when she went to work with President Trump. 5,000 jobs at stake in the Selfridge Air Force Base, just a few miles from where we're sitting, anchoring the Macomb County defense industry, and it was going to close. They had lost their fighter missions, and if they didn't get new ones, it had been devastating.
She got slammed by Democrats.
Governor
and
Whitmer,
Republicans.
Governor Whitmer repeatedly went to the White House, pitched the president. When he came here and gave her credit, what happened? First tweet, Jocelyn, Benson, there's nothing to celebrate here. Attacking the governor for bringing 5,000 jobs to Michigan because she worked with Donald Trump. I think what Governor Whitmer has done is the right thing. She's looking for people in Michigan first, and she knew she was going to get criticized for working with Republicans. But at the end of the day, each of us makes a decision. Are you a Democrat first, or do you represent the people of Michigan first? And Governor Whitmer, I think, is showing really good leadership.
You've shown us the upsides of running as an independent. What are some of the downsides? What are the toughest things about running as an independent?
Well, the first upside is that everybody comes to see me in every town, and it's pretty interesting. You know, we're getting good groups of people, and when I ask who's Republican, who's Democrat, they're split. When I said, would you ever be in the same room together? If I were running as a Democrat for governor, they just start laughing. People, there's too many people here. If somebody's a Democrat, I won't listen to them. Somebody's a Republican, I won't listen to them. But when I show up in these towns as an independent, everybody comes in and we get
MAGA
to talk.
Republicans and Democrats
It is so interesting, and I can get the two of them talking to each other by the time we're done.
And if you're wondering, hey, what about the other candidates? Well, we can tell you right now, we're talking with all the candidates. This week alone, Congressman John James will be here tomorrow on the Pulse set, and Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson will be here on Thursday. And then the following week and the weeks to come, all the other candidates that we, by the way, have already had on not once but twice already will have their third time around as well. We're not leaving anybody out. All right, my friends, but since we're just a week out from the race for Detroit mayor, we wanted to do a quick, in case you missed it with that race, both candidates were in Studio C talking about the issues that matter most to you. We'll have a recap. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. It is people, power, and politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show, The Pulse. We're glad you're with us. We're 1 week out from the biggest election in Detroit in more than a decade. One of two candidates, City Council President Mary Sheffield and Triumph Church Senior Pastor Solomon Kinloch Jr. will be the city's first new mayor in more than a decade. And last night, they were in Studio C talking about the topics that matter most to you. So in case you missed it, we're giving you a quick recap of some of the big topics we hit last night, starting with one of the most polarizing ones, the possibility of National Guard troops in Detroit. I asked them both if they'd be open to it. Here's what they said.
I have been very firm in my approach that I do not believe we need to militarize our neighborhoods to address public safety. I welcome federal resources, whether it's funding for housing, funding for mental health, funding for our community violence intervention work. But I believe that it is going to take strong partnerships rooted in our support with the federal government and law enforcement and community. And so that will be my approach. And as mayor, my goal is to always make sure that we are proactive in preventing the National Guard from coming to Detroit.
But we're never in favor of National Guard or armed forces paroling and policing the streets of Detroit. Policing and patrolling is a local responsibility, and we have great men and women in the city of Detroit who carry out that responsibility with dignity, integrity, and respect. So we want to continue to do that. But we also have partnerships like the One Detroit Initiative, where you partner with the Wayne County Prosecutor, you partner with the FBI and other local and state and federal law enforcement agencies in order to continue to come up with a strategy to bring crime down. Because crime don't just affect Detroit, it affects us all.
Now, one of the other big questions we got from you were questions about neighborhood improvement. I talked to both of them about how they plan to make sure the neighborhoods see the same improvement that the downtown has and the local economy as well.
Our economy has to be more inclusive. We have done some good things in the city of Detroit, but it hasn't gone far enough. We have to remind ourselves that we living in a city. This is why I got in this race. We're living in a city where the majority of our children are in poverty. We're living in a city where the poverty rate continues to climb and exasperate to the point where it's the highest it has been since 2017, where crime, violent crime, is the second highest in Detroit compared to the nation, and 3 out of 4 of our citizens are struggling with finding affordable housing. We have a constituency, 40% of the residents in the city use 50% of their income to keep a roof over their head. What I would say to Carla and all the residents of the city of Detroit is that we have got to make this more inclusive. How do we do that? We have 38,000 small businesses in the city of Detroit. We will launch the local hiring initiatives. Just imagine if those 38,000 businesses hire one Detroiter. That's an increase in income revenue. That's an increase in population. That's one of the greatest job growth that we would have seen in recent times.
We have more work to do. Detroit is a big city. There has been some investments in some areas of Detroit, but more needs to fill it. And that is my goal, is to build up our communities in our neighborhood so that every neighborhood feels the opportunity, that we're building more housing, more paths to home ownership, and that we're raising the incomes of the residents that live here. We still have an extremely high poverty rate in Detroit, and I have always been on the front lines with our men and women in labor, ensuring that we're pushing for good livable wage jobs in Detroit, but we want to ensure that we are pushing for increased upward mobility for the residents that live here in Detroit.
Well, if you missed any of that forum, you can scan the QR code right there at the bottom of your screen to watch the whole thing. I spoke with both candidates for 11.5 minutes, and we've said it before, the race impacts all of Metro Detroit. Even if you live in the suburbs, this city is so important to all of us, so you'll really want to pay attention to what happens. That is the Pulse for tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ruth Barrage. As always, it was good to be with you.